Welcome back, everybody. We are diving deep today into something super important, especially for us as Seventh-day Adventist Christians,
Mm.
the Sabbath.
Yeah.
And get this, we've got Ellen G. White to guide us. We're going to be looking at some stuff from her daily devotional, My Life Today.
It's honestly amazing. Her words are so on point, you know? Even though they were written ages ago, they speak directly to the stuff we're dealing with today.
Totally. Like, right off the bat, we see this picture of John the Apostle, but he's exiled on Patmos.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So talk about tough conditions for keeping the Sabbath holy.
Yeah.
Can you even imagine? I mean, rocky, barren landscapes.
Yeah.
It almost makes you think of Horeb,
Right.
the mountain where the 10 Commandments were given.
It's wild, right? That parallel is so strong. I think it's like Ellen G. White is saying, those tough landscapes, it's almost like they mirror how God's law never changes, you know? Like those mountains, the commandments just stand firm no matter what. They're for us today just as much as back then.
And she brings in Ezekiel 20.12 too to drive that point home.
Right.
God says, "Moreover also I gave them my Sabbaths, to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord that sanctify them."
So I gotta ask, what does that mean to you? Like this whole Sabbath as a sign of being sanctified?
Ah, man, that part always gets me.
Yeah.
It's deep, right? Because it's not just about saying, okay, I did the Sabbath thing, check.
Right.
It's letting God really work on us. He changes us, like, from the inside out.
So it's more than just taking a break on the seventh day.
Way more. It's about getting closer to God, letting His presence affect how we think, what we do, even who we are at our core. It's like every Sabbath reminds us, hey, you belong to Him. He's making you more like Him.
Okay, but I've always wondered, what does that look like? Like, how does sanctification show up in our everyday lives? You know, I've asked that question a lot too. But Ellen G. White, she gives us some hints. She wrote, "All who regard the Sabbath as a sign between them and God will represent the principles of His government. They will bring into daily practice the laws of His kingdom. Daily it will be their prayer that the sanctification of the Sabbath may rest upon them." Basically, she's saying it affects our whole lifestyle. It's about lining up our lives with God's way of doing things, not just one day, but always.
So it's almost like the Sabbath kickstarts this holy living. It's like we're reflecting God in all we do because of it. But honestly, sometimes it feels like, ugh, another rule, another thing on my checklist.
I know what you mean. It's easy to get caught up in the gotta-dos and forget why the Sabbath even matters. But if we dig a little deeper, it's not about rules. It's about getting this rhythm of rest and getting renewed closer to God. And that makes us more like Him.
Okay, now I'm really interested. How do we change that view? How do we see the Sabbath as this joyful thing that makes us holy, not a burden?
Well, let's look at what Ellen G. White actually says about keeping the Sabbath. She talks about rest, thinking deeply about stuff, spending time with other Christians, and helping people out. Those are the key parts, you know? If we want to feel that power of the Sabbath changing us, we need those things.
Makes sense. It's about what we do to connect with God, not just what we avoid doing.
Exactly.
So let's break it down. What does true Sabbath rest even look like?
It's about quieting ourselves, both our minds and our hearts. Letting go of that crazy busyness from the week. We have to choose to be still, let God work on us, refresh our souls, get that spirit back.
I love that. Quieting our minds and hearts, like hitting pause on all the chaos so we can hear God's voice,
Let Him lead us.
You got it. And that's where the magic happens. We step away from everything the world is shouting at us, and suddenly there's this space for something amazing, a real deep connection with our Creator. That's how He refreshes us.
Wow, this is powerful stuff. So it's more than just not working on Sabbath. It's about actively doing things that bring us closer to God and let Him change us. You're getting it. And there's more to unpack. That change, that transformation, it happens through reflecting, through community, through serving others. We'll get into all that as we keep diving deeper. It's wild, when we're talking about real Sabbath rest, my mind keeps going back to that image of Horeb.
Oh, yeah, the mountain where God gave the 10 Commandments.
Exactly. And Ellen G. White, she makes this amazing link between what that mountain looks like and what God's law is like, doesn't she?
She does. It's all rocky and bare, kind of harsh, actually.
Right, and that's the point. It's like she's using those rocks and that emptiness to show how God's rules never change. Just like those mountains stand strong against the wind and the rain, God's law is unshakable, including the Sabbath.
It's almost like the land itself is saying, hey, this is serious, this is forever. Makes me think about John on Patmos, with those cliffs all around him. It must have felt a bit like Horeb. Like, even though he was all alone, the land was reminding him how important the Sabbath is.
That's it, exactly. And I think that's a big lesson for us too. Wherever we are, whatever's going on, the Sabbath is there. It's a sign of hope, strength, and it reminds us that God's love never goes away.
It's like that Sabbath rhythm, that time we set aside for God. It makes this sacred space in our lives, like a safe place where we can connect with Him and get a fresh start.
I love how you put that. And talking about fresh starts, that's where thinking deeply comes in. Ellen G. White calls the Sabbath a time to examine our hearts and ask for his guidance.
Like a spiritual checkup, where we step back from the craziness and see where we stand with God.
Exactly. It's a time to think about what we're thinking, what we're doing, what's motivating us, and it's a chance to say, okay, I messed up, I need forgiveness, and then we try again to do things God's way.
So it's more than just feeling good or getting rested. It's about growing closer to God, changing to be more like Him.
You got it. It's about inviting God into those quiet places in our hearts, letting Him guide us and shape us. And you know what? When we do that, when we really take time to look at ourselves honestly, it affects how we treat others.
I can see that. We hear God more clearly, we see our own faults better, and that makes us more patient and understanding with everyone else.
Yeah. The peace we find in God, it spreads out, touches our whole life, even how we treat people.
That takes us to another beautiful part of the Sabbath, being together. Ellen G. White, she really pushed the importance of meeting with other Christians, sharing meals, encouraging each other.
There's nothing like being around other people who share your faith.
Right?
We can worship together, learn from each other, support each other as we follow Jesus.
Yeah. It reminds us, hey, you're not alone in this. We're part of something much bigger, connected by our love for Christ.
Like those Sabbath gatherings, they weave together faith and friendship. We get stronger, and we remember that we're part of something way bigger than ourselves. And let's not forget about serving others. Even on Sabbath, we can show God's love, be a blessing to people.
I love that. It's like taking the rest we get on Sabbath and giving it away, using that energy to do something good in the world.
You got it. It could be simple things, like saying something kind to a stranger, visiting someone who's lonely, or helping out where it's needed.
So even though we're resting from our regular work, the Sabbath isn't about just sitting around. It's about doing things that make God happy and help others.
Exactly. It's putting our faith into action. And when we do that, when God works through us, that's the real meaning of being made holy. We become like channels for His grace and love, bringing peace to others.
This is inspiring. Makes me think about how I can make my Sabbaths more meaningful, not just for me, but for everyone around me.
And that's what's so amazing about the Sabbath. It's not just about what we get from it. It's about how it changes us and helps us bless others.
So we've got rest, reflection, community, and service as the key parts of keeping the Sabbath. It sounds like it's not a bunch of strict rules, but more like this flow of grace that affects our whole lives.
Exactly. It's about getting in sync with God's heart, letting His presence change us from the inside out. And when we do that, we find out the Sabbath isn't a chore, it's a gift. It's a chance to experience the full life that God wants for us.
I've learned so much today. But I have to ask, how do we put all this into practice in our modern lives? There's so many distractions and demands these days. How do we make the Sabbath a priority when it feels like the world is pulling us in a million directions?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one we need to talk about. Let's dive into that next time, how to actually keep the Sabbath in the 21st century.
It's pretty amazing as we're wrapping up this deep dive into the Sabbath,
Oh.
how much Ellen G. White's words still apply to us today. I mean, we're living in a totally different world than she did.
I know, right? It's like she saw it coming, though. All this crazy busyness, technology everywhere. Everyone's going to be on 24/7.
Exactly. Like hitting the reset button. Only it's for our souls. We step away from the world's demands and get back in touch with what really matters. God.
Exactly.
Wow.
And when we do that, when we set aside that time for God, He can really work on us. He heals us, restores our souls, fills us with His peace, and that peace, well, you can't get that anywhere else.
So it's not just about doing the right things outwardly. It's about letting that Sabbath rest sink deep into our hearts and minds. That's where the real change happens.
You said it. It's about experiencing that deep, soul-satisfying rest that only comes from being with God.
Which brings us back to something we talked about earlier, this idea of the Sabbath as a sign that we're being sanctified, made holy. How does that fit into all of this?
It's all connected. The more we embrace the Sabbath and let God work in us, the more we become like Him. We get more loving, more gracious, more holy. It happens little by little, but the Sabbath keeps us on track. It's that weekly reminder to check in with God, to let Him adjust our course and make us more like Him.
So each Sabbath is like another step toward becoming more like Jesus, reflecting his character and love more and more.
That's a great way to put it. And as we live this Sabbath life, we start to experience the real freedom and joy that comes with doing things God's way.
It's not about rules or being all strict. It's about finding a rhythm of life that gets us closer to God and helps us live the full, abundant life he wants for us.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to think about. How can you make the Sabbath more intentional, more meaningful in your own life? How can you carve out that sacred space, that place of rest and renewal, right in the middle of your busy week?
It's something we all need to consider. And if you're looking for more on this topic, I highly recommend checking out Ellen G. White's writings. Her insights on the Sabbath are timeless, and they offer so much practical guidance on how to live it out today.
And don't forget, the Sabbath is a gift. It's an invitation to experience God's presence in a deep and powerful way. Don't let the busyness of life steal this chance from you. Connect with your Creator, be refreshed by His grace, and let His love transform you.
Beautifully said. And until next time, may your Sabbaths be full of peace, joy, and that amazing feeling of connection with the God who made you and loves you more than you can imagine.